So I hope this video will come out okay. I've been doing some investigation on the OEM Lithium pack because I've got that on the bench at the minute while I'm doing some data gathering. So I've actually disassembled it. But just to start you off, this is actually an nickel metal hydride DC to DC converter. So I'll now show you the lithium version. So this is the lithium version with the top off. And I'll just put that in the centre of the frame, and basically has a little cover like that, so you can see they're not the same form factor, so that's the first issue. Now I'm going to test this one in the same way as I tested the nickel metal hydride ones to find out what its voltage tolerance is. I'm hoping it's going to be considerably higher than the 150 volts that the nickel metal hydride one shuts down at, because this actually runs at normally 150 volts anyway, or just above, all the time, so it must have a higher tolerance than that. So basically I'm going to put some HV into this side of it here. I'm going to give it some 12 volt power here and here, and we'll see when it shuts down the output. Basically, as soon as it shuts down the output, we'll know that that's the maximum input voltage that it can tolerate. So you can see it's very nice and compact. It's like a next generation DC to DC converter. Nicely made. It you know, standard, very high quality TDK inverter or converter. So that's the DC to DC converter, and I'm going to be testing that shortly. So I'll put that aside. So then we've got the PCM or MCM, as I like to call it. So this is the control module. Dropped my printed circuit board. So after I've taken that out earlier on, just taking the bolts out. So you can see that is it's a double-sided board, and this controls the motor and looks after the battery, does the battery balancing, probably sends messages in relation to that. This receives signals from the BMS boards in the lithium pack and from the ECM at the front. So we've done quite a bit of work on this. There's not really much we need to do as regards this, because I may well not be using it. I may well be using a nickel metal hydride MCM, because it's probably got the same outputs to drive the IPU module, which we'll get to in a minute. So anyway, on this side it's got two CPUs. There's one on this side which is probably the motor or battery control module CPU, and on the other side it's got another one, so this will be the battery or motor control module CPU. But as I say, I don't really need to do too much investigation on that, and it's got a high voltage input here, and that can easily be fooled with a potential divider because it's a very high impedance input. So that's the MCM. Let's put that back. I'll put that back together. So then the last thing we have is the IPU module, which is the bit that does all the work. So this is the IPU module, and you can see it's quite big. It won't quite fit in frame. It'll do now. Just tilt that up slightly. So these are the three-phase connections here to the motor, and we have the high voltage input here. Now this one doesn't sort of pass through like it does on the older nickel metal hydride version, because the DC to DC converter is connected over here on the older version, and this one, the bus bars are fairly circuitous and go off around the corner there. So anyway, what I'm going to do with this again is I'm just going to put some high voltage into it. I'll power up the logic, and we'll see. It'll be outputting some messages on serial output here, and I've looked at those before, and that's what we've been faking with the IPU interceptor on the nickel metal hydride. So what I'm going to do is I'll look at those voltages, and I'll see when there is a significant change in the sort of serial data output, i.e. it's reached its sort of limit. And this is probably a higher current capacity module. It feels heavier and more substantial than the 10 kilowatt rated, or whatever it's rated, nickel metal hydride version, although we do know that that can easily be cranked up to over 20 kilowatts. This one I'm hoping will reach over 30 kilowatts with the right amount of high voltage and control signals. So that's where we are. So I've got the I'll just show you the lithium pack. It's in pieces here. So I've taken all the control modules out to do the bench testing, and it'll be now a question of seeing what voltage the DC to DC will tolerate, what voltage this will tolerate, and then probably making a Frankenstein pack based on using the IPU here, the DC to DC here if it operates on a higher voltage, and a nickel metal hydride control MCM because I know how to interact with that. We don't have any CAN issues with that, and we know that that will communicate with the ECM at the front without issue. We know we can control the IMA with that. So using a nickel metal hydride one which is well understood already, avoids having to do too much work on the lithium one, which is probably not going to be suitable for our uses anyway. So we're looking at a nickel metal hydride MCM and a lithium DC to DC and a lithium IPU, which are probably both going to be higher rated. Certainly this one will probably be rated higher for current and voltage, and hopefully this one will as well. So that's where we are. Research going on. I have actually captured data already from these two modules working on the bench in the IPU connected to the battery. So I've actually connected some IPU data today this morning, and I've connected the I've collected the DC to DC serial data which goes to the MCM, so I can see if they're the same as the nickel metal hydride data. If they are, then obviously that means that's additionally compatible and makes the swap using the MCM from the nickel metal hydride car easier. So that's where we are at the minute. There's a bit of quite a bit of complication stuff going on, but it's all just data gathering, and I am still hoping to go over and capture the data from the lithium car maybe early next week, depending on the availability. So yeah, lots still going on, and that's where we're at the minute.